Story Elements Part 2 with Miss Maloney.
Hey, welcome back to another at-home online ELA instruction with Miss Maloney. If you have not already, this will be a good time to go back to my last video where I talked about character and setting. Those are the first main parts of story element that you should know in order to follow along what we're about to talk about today. But for sure, here's a recap of the definitions of character and setting.
According to literaryterms.com, a character is a person, animal, being, creature, or thing in the story. The setting is the time and place or when and where the story is taking place.
Okay, great. Now that we know those two terms, today we're going to be talking about plot.
So today's objective is I can identify the plot within the story. But before we begin, let's go over some expectations. Number 1, please always have some paper and a pencil with a good eraser to take great notes. Number 2, listen carefully for there will be questions throughout our session. And number 3, pause, reflect, rewind, and review if you need to.
So, what do you think the definition of plot is? I can definitely tell you that there are 5 different elements that are in plot. I'll wait. Okay, so what did you come up with? What is plot? And did you guess all 5 elements of plot?
According to literaryterms.com, a plot in a narrative or creative writing, a plot is the sequence of the events that make up a story, whether it's told, written, filmed, or sung. The plot is the story and, more specifically, how the story develops, unfolds, and moves in time. Plots are typically made up of 5 main elements. These 5 elements are exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. So let's take our learning outside.
The exposition is the beginning of the story. Just like this trail, as I'm starting my adventure, is the beginning. There's nothing really going on. It's not as high, it's not as low. It's just the beginning. This is where I'm going to explain the characters of the story and the setting. So if I was beginning my story, I would be the character. And as you can see, my setting is on a trail. I'm starting off very slow, just letting you know who the characters are in the story and where the setting is before I set up the rest of the story for the plot. The rising action.
So as I'm taking my journey up this hill, I'm not exactly sure what might happen or what problems or challenges I might face. But I know that as soon as I get to the top, something exciting or a plot twist might happen.
And then there's a part where the story goes for a twist. This is where the climax will happen during the plot of the story.
So I can say that the climax of my story, I definitely stumbled across a few rocks. But now I'm going downhill towards my
Or the falling action. Sometimes the climax can be something that is exciting. So as I'm going down this hill, it's very exciting, but it might have some challenges, it might have some problems. So me as the character, the problem that I'm facing is that this is a very rocky slope. And I don't know if I'm going to make it down the hill, but hopefully my resolution is looking great at the end. And lastly is the resolution, the end of the trail. So me as the character on this trail as my setting, as I went through my exposition, my rising action, climax, falling action, I finally have reached the end of my journey. So all good stories must come to an end. I hope you enjoyed. So let's get back into the classroom. So we're back from our adventure outside. I hope you guys had loved my little story and actually learned about plot. So let's take a look up here at our objective of the day. I can identify the plot within the story. Did we complete our objective today? If not, let me hone in on something that we're all familiar with. A read aloud. Okay, so if the shoe fits, we have been reading this in class for quite some time before we have gotten on break, and there's a few stories that we have not read yet. Today, we're going to read on page 39, Fima's Footprints. So in this story, I really want you guys to really listen. Our expectation number 2 is to listen, take notes, because I will be asking questions throughout this lesson. Well, at the end. So listen carefully, read along with me, and I'm going to ask you a few questions about character, setting, but mainly, like our objective today, plot.
Fima's Footprints, written and illustrated by McKinley Baker. Once upon a time, in the West African kingdom of the Ashanti, there lived a girl who was beautiful and kind. The best part about her, though, was her singing. She would happily share a song with anyone around her. Her family was not kind. Her brothers and sisters were wasteful and greedy. While Fima and the other villagers shared their food, water, and clothing, her brothers and sisters kept everything to themselves. Fima would say, "As long as I have what I need, I will be happy." Her brothers and sisters refused to do their daily chores. Fima was forced to do all the cooking and cleaning. She would wake up very early and go to sleep very late each night. Each morning, Frima walked to the river to get water. The walk to the river was long, and Frima's water jug was heavy. Although the path there were many different flowers in every color. Frima sang to the flowers, and the flowers always stood a little taller as she walked past. Even though it made her jug heavier, Frima always filled her jug with a little extra water to give to the flowers on the walk home. One day, news came to the village that the prince wanted to see his beautiful country and would be coming to visit their village on his tour. The villagers collected their best clothing and worked together to make the village and each other as beautiful as possible. Frima's family kept all their clothing to themselves. He would see how important we are and ask us to work for him, they said. They piled all the clothing in the house onto themselves. After a long day of chores, Frima returned to the village late, after everyone else was already dressed. She saw that her family had left her nothing to wear. She would be stuck meeting the prince in the dirty rags she had on. Frima left her home in search of a solution. "I will embarrass my whole village if I appear before the prince covered in mud," she cried. Her tears fell on the flowers on the side of the road. The flowers turned to her and began to speak. "Don't worry, Frima. You shared your lovely voice with us, and you've given us water to drink. Now we can share with you." The flowers plucked themselves from the ground and wove themselves into a beautiful kente dress and sandals fit for a queen. When the prince arrived, Freema's family pushed to the front of the crowd. The prince was unimpressed by how overdressed they were compared to the other villagers. Then the village seemed to brighten as Freema came forward. The prince stopped and stared. He had eyes for no one but Freema. Freema's brothers and sisters were angry at how much attention the prince paid to Freema. "She is dressed in flowers? They aren't worth a thing," they cried. With her family upset with her, and the entire village staring at her, Freema became embarrassed and ran away. As she ran, a flower dropped from her dress onto the ground. The prince picked it up and followed her footprints. The prince found Freema by the river. Gently, he offered her the fallen flower. "You are covered in the flowers of my country, and that is more beautiful than the most expensive clothing," said the prince. He asked Freema to be his princess, and she happily agreed. Together, they spread their wealth across their beautiful country. Wow, that story was great. As you can see, it made me want to put on something that made me feel like a queen and put a flower in my hair just like Freema. I hope you enjoyed the story as much as I did. Well, you know what time it is. Questions. Who are the characters in the story? Where is the setting in the story? What was happening in the rising action of this story? What happened at the climax of the story? What was happening in the falling action of the story? And lastly, what was the resolution of the story? I give you a hint. It had a happily ever after. So if you didn't quite understand how to identify a plot, you might want to go back and review these three expectations. Number one, please always have some paper and a pencil with a good eraser to take good notes. Number two, listen carefully for there will be questions throughout our session. And number three, pause, reflect, rewind, and review if you need to. Well, hope you had fun with me during my silly adventures and learning about how to identify plot within a story. I hope you have remembered all the expectations too, in case you have forgotten or you quite not understand how to identify a plot in a story. So, this concludes my lesson. Until next time, peace.